What's up everybody and welcome back to a brand new episode, and tell me, does this ever happen to you? What the hell is this? Why is this controller ass? Who made this? This is literally impossible. Why do they not give me difficulty options? How is anybody supposed to get through this? Damn it! Picture this, it's Friday afternoon and you just got Dark Souls remastered on the PS4. You pop your game into the system, get 30 minutes in, and then you see that sweet, sweet message for the first time. No, I didn't! Video games are challenging by design. The core idea behind video games is giving the players a task and trusting that the person can use the tools and skills they've learned to overcome the obstacles at hand. No matter how simple or complex a video game is, you can still simplify the main objective down to a single goal. Pac-Man, you eat the fruit. Farmville, you farm the ville. Cooking Mama, you cook the mama. I think I might be playing the wrong game here. But how does a developer determine how challenging a game should be? A game needs to be accessible enough for newcomers to jump into the action and understand what you're supposed to do. Make the game too difficult and you're sure to lose some players along the way. However, make it too easy and the player might feel like they wasted $40 for a flashy whole day to win simulator. This is where difficulties come in, how a developer determines how much you should hate yourself after you've tried 40 times and you still can't beat Sephiroth in Kingdom Hearts 2. Video games are a means of escape. The reason many people play video games is because they can't overcome their challenges in the real world. Real life is tough. Why do I want to jump into a game where I die over and over and over and over? So that leads to the question of, is this game too hard? Is this game not hard enough? Is this game posing an actual challenge to me, or is this just poor game design? Why is it that I can get through the entirety of Zelda 2 in less than a day, but as a kid it took me almost 2 years to get out of this prison cell in Star Fox Adventures, when literally all I had to do was walk around this puddle? Remember, all difficulties in video games are subjective. Now, video games were a lot simpler back then. For a quarter or less, you could hit a local arcade up with a group of friends and play video games as much as you want. If you understood these machines, you could take a couple dollars and stretch it out for hours of entertainment if you wanted to. Developers caught on to this pretty quickly. That's when they decided to say, "F it, let's put this stupid random springboard in the middle of Donkey Kong." Sure, these machines are games, but at the end of the day, they're still a means of profit. Developers had to make games harder, keep people playing longer, so that when you're right there at the end and you die. Now, I will say, some games can do this really well. I can play games like Dig Dug and Pac-Man all day long. I'm completely in control of the action at all times. If a mistake is made, damn it, I'm frustrated, but at least it's my own fault. I made that wrong turn. It's when you get these stupid random elements thrown in that I start to get aggravated. Donkey Kong is the worst offender of this in my opinion. I love the Mario series to death, but I just can't stand the original entry. I'm lucky if I can make it about halfway up the level without getting hit by anything, and even then, when I get to the top and lose a life, I don't want to keep going, I just want to move on to a better game. But hey, what about the NES? Now that console games are in the home, games can be easier, right? They got a lot harder, didn't they? Oftentimes I hear people say, oh, NES games, they are so much harder than games nowadays. You want a real challenge? Play Battletoads. You will never make it past Turbo Tunnel. But these games are just as bad as an arcade game, if not worse. Look, you're doing really good in this section. Well, guess what? Not anymore. Games were far bigger than arcade games once they came to home consoles. You give me a game that I can play as much as I want, whenever I want, of course I'm gonna wear that thing out. But I can't just go to an arcade, spend a quarter to play it once just to be disappointed and never play it again. No, I had to spend $40 to be disappointed. Unfair boss fights, randomly spawning enemies, disappearing platforms, no checkpoints or passwords. These are all essentially developers asking the question, how can we turn a 30-minute game into a week-long experience? It makes sense, your parents buy you a game and you have to make it last, but a game should continuously reward you for getting better instead of doing the common thing and relying on whatever cheap bullshit it can to throw you all the way back to the start. You get these platforming sections that require pixel-perfect jumps, a countless horde of an endless wave of enemies. When a game gets to the point where it's more about memorization and guessing, the game isn't difficult because it's hard to execute, the game is difficult because it's time-consuming. Now, to be fair, there are some games back then that did a great job of this. The original Legend of Zelda is a perfect example. Even though it does have a fair amount of the things I mentioned before, it doesn't feel overwhelming to the player. Each level progressively gets more difficult the further you get into the game, and it has a save feature. But then you get games like Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. It's not necessarily a hard game, but almost all of its difficulty comes from hidden blocks and puzzle sections that you have to memorize to progress. this? This to me is just bad game design. The game isn't giving you all of the visual indicators you need to perform the actions, but requires you to be so precise that it's nearly unachievable. But these are games on the NES, so what about Growing Pains? Games that are difficult because developers didn't truly understand technology at the time. That's when we jump from the NES all the way to Super Mario 64, a game I've heard a lot of people say is actually hard since the release of Super Mario 3D All-Stars. While I do think the game has its moments of difficulty, it's not because the game itself is inherently challenging. 3D technology was new at the time, so trying to traverse a 3D space was something that developers didn't quite understand yet. Primitive cameras, questionable hitboxes, odd enemy movement, these were all boundaries needed to be crossed to progress gaming as a whole. It's not like they were purposely put into the game to intimidate the player, that's just the best they could do at the time. Thankfully today, games aren't really like this. We have 30, 40, 80 hours experiences, with teams of more than 200 people working on a single game. If a game is meant to be challenging, it is meant to be challenging. Yeah, I'm sure plenty of you saw this coming. Dark Souls, the game where if any other game has any slight degree of difficulty, they just have to make the comparison. Dark Souls is not for the faint of heart. It's a game meant for people who truly want to challenge themselves. If you're a big fan of Animal Crossing, you probably won't like Dark Souls, unless you're me. But its take on difficulty is definitely something that's pretty neat. At its core, Dark Souls is actually a really simple game. There's no combos, no ultimate moves. It's attack, evade, parry, and run away. A lot of running away. The gameplay is a bit boring on the surface, but it makes this game transform into more of a chess match, a continuous strategy of planning your next step 5 actions ahead to make sure you can survive. When you fight a boss, you have to plan out your attacks, understand when the boss will move, where the boss will move. If you get hit once, you're pretty much close to dead, so the slower paced gameplay really makes you feel more connected to the game at hand. Now, this is Devil May Cry 5. I'm pressing 700 buttons at the same time. If a mistake is made, how the hell am I supposed to know what I'm doing wrong? If I make a mistake in Dark Souls, it's pretty clear to see that I'm the one that made that mistake. Most of the time. But what if you don't want a challenging experience? Not everyone wants to hate themselves when they play video games, and difficulty options are a good alternative for those who just want to understand the story of the game. I play Rock Band on expert difficulties not just because I'm a cocky son of a bitch, but because that's the way I get the most enjoyment out of the game. But put somebody else on this experience and it can be agonizing to them. Can you imagine jumping into a rhythm game and this is the standard? The same works the opposite way around. If this is the difficulty of gameplay that I can expect from a game on easy mode, why do I want to continue subjecting myself to this? I'm not having fun here. Changes in gameplay work best when the core gameplay mechanics start to change as you scale up the difficulty. In Guitar Hero, the higher the difficulty, the more buttons you have to control at the same time. Final Fantasy VII Remake on hard doesn't allow you to use items in battle, completely changing the way that you fight. When you add an extra layer to the game, it completely changes the game's experience to the point where after a while, you're playing a completely different version of the same game. Breath of the Wild is a prime example. The normal game is not difficult by any means, but Master Mode makes this feel like a completely different adventure. Enemies are not only much stronger, but restore health as well, and weapons break at almost double the speed. While the normal game is focused on exploration, Master Quest is truly a test of survival by using all of the resources around you. It truly feels like a different game. However, if you don't like the weapons breaking system, you will fucking hate this. But then you get to video games without difficulty options. Games where there's only one way to experience what the developers created. I feel like this is where creativity shines through the most. This is where you get your puzzle games, collectathons, speedruns. You've still got to make sure the game is paced well and progressively gets more difficult, but it's ultimately up to the player to decide how they want to tackle that obstacle. Zelda games are especially noted for how they handle difficulty. I can't think of an especially difficult Zelda game in the mainline series besides Zelda 2, but each game makes for an added challenge. Enemies serve as a nice change in combat, but the puzzles are truly what test your difficulty, albeit more intellectual than physical. However, I think Portal 2 portrays this a whole lot better though. You can tackle the game any way you want to, but there's only one beginning and one ending to a stage. However difficult the player wants to make the game is entirely in their hands. If you want to do death-defying tactics to make it to the end, nothing is stopping you except gravity. Collectathons are prominent here too. You can go through the game by just beating the main story if you want to, but there's that added joy of going the extra mile to collect everything, challenging the most daunting of levels to gather every last collectible in the game. People love a good challenge. That's why video games have become much more difficult in recent years, but there's nothing wrong with a more casual experience. Sometimes you don't want to experience a grueling adventure. You just want to sit back, relax, and play Balan Wonderworld for the story. Game developers in the past few years have really stepped up their game, adding new accessibility options and alternate ways of play for those who want to just enjoy more games casually in their free time. Invincibility for when you just want to experience the story of the game. Partner mode for when two people want to tackle a game at the same time. There's so many different options out there for people to play video games now that I figured I'd take this last minute to just go over some of my favorite difficulty curves in video games. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! This is on pretty much everybody's list of hardest video games of all time, but it's a really good game. It's got a unique password system, it's got highly memorable characters with neat attack patterns. I haven't actually beaten this game yet, but I have beaten The Adventure of Link. F-Zero GX, another game that is considered one of the hardest games of all time. I have tried for hours to beat the Save Jody mission, but it is certifiably the only mission in a video game that I have never been able to complete. I tried it for 6 hours one day, gave it up, and said, F it, we're playing Wario World. Beyond Two Souls. This is a narrative-driven game created by the same team behind Heavy Rain and Detroit Become Human. I think the most difficult part about this game is trying to figure out what the f was going on in David Cage's mind when he wrote it. Kingdom Hearts 3. If you've ever wondered how Square got its name, all you have to do is play Kingdom Hearts 3 and press the square button, and congratulations! You've beaten Kingdom Hearts 3. Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. No. Persona 5 Royal. The hardest part about Persona 5 Royal is not mentioning it. Fire Emblem 3 Houses. If you're a little bitch, you can turn off the permadeath feature, which allows you to have your characters survive after they fall in battle. What, does the game actually want me to care for these characters? Please, I let Marianne die in the first chapter. Crash Bandicoot 4. In my opinion, the best Crash Bandicoot game to release, with a fantastic difficulty curve. It's just unfortunate that after you beat the game, there are so many collectibles and backtracking that you have to do that it just makes the game not worth it. But the game does make up for it in the fact that Dingodile says the Australian equivalent of the word Now, if you're having trouble beating Yoshi's Woolly World on the Wii U, that is perfectly fine, okay? Take all the time you need.